Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to Job Search Radio. I like to spend about a half hour speaking with an expert about some element of job search. And here I have one who's a corporate recruiter for a large health facility in the Mid-Atlantic area of the United States. He's going to talk with you about some of his processes, what he looks for, and what I thought would be real useful here is to give you an idea of what it's like on the corporate side when they're trying to evaluate and assess people. So I hope you enjoy the show, and if you do, come over to iTunes, give it 5 stars, give Job Search Radio a great rating. It helps other people discover the show. So let's sing along.
Are you looking for a new job or interested in leveling up? Job Search Radio is your go-to resource for insider tips on job hunting and growing your career. Here's your host, Jeff Altman.
So my guest is Lucas Schoolfield, a healthcare recruiter with organizations in the Mid-Atlantic area. Lucas, welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you on board.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Terrific. So experience tells me when little boys and little girls are growing up, no one says to their parents, "Mommy, I want to be a recruiter." You know, there are other things that they're thinking of doing. How did you wind up entering the field?
Well, it's kind of what I think most recruiters you talk to, especially those of us that come from staffing, would fell into it. Nobody, like you were saying, nobody really studies recruitment in college or grows up thinking they're going to be a recruiter someday for an organization, for a staffing company. I kind of just came by it by referral, which, ironic being a recruiter, but I got into recruitment through a staffing agency. I was there for about 2 years, and then kind of after that I realized I wanted to make the transition into corporate recruitment, which I've been doing for the last almost 4 years now, 3 to 4 years.
Terrific. And when you were working for the staffing agency, what kind of positions were you trying to fill?
Originally, I was more in the skilled trades in the construction industry. So that meant working with local general contractors, whether it be plumbers, electricians, pipe fitters, carpenters. Then that briefly transitioned over into more of an engineering recruit. So I'd work with a lot of civil engineers or design engineers for small or large commercial contracts. I did that for probably 9 months to a year between the two skilled trades and the engineer recruitment. It was a good way to kind of cut my teeth into recruitment and then also to the construction industry through the skilled trades because they are higher volume, lower level recruits, more about reading resumes, matching skill sets, and then kind of plug and play, getting them to the right spots, where then that trains you for the people skills and kind of the analytical skills needed to evaluate higher level talent positions like people with master's degrees or engineering degrees that you don't really know much about because obviously I'm not an engineer, but I still need to be able to talk to people and evaluate if they can do what their resume says, which is a skill actually it's harder to find than you think. I tell people all the time as a recruiter, I can never do the positions I'm recruiting for, but I need to be able to evaluate if somebody can or not. So I need to know a little bit about them. But
absolutely, I'm the same way. I'm not an expert in IT, accounting and finance, or Wall Street operations, but I've learned over the years because my clients have taught me how to evaluate people for specific jobs so that when I refer someone to them, there's a reasonable probability that there's a good match.
Yep.
I'm sure the same is true.
And you can probably attest to one of the best ways to do that is just talking to people, but if that's we can get into that further in the interview if needed, so.
You betcha. And from working for the staffing firm, you transitioned into corporate. And what kind of positions have you worked on since moving into corporate?
Well, I've been fortunate. I've worked for 2 different health systems now in the area. The first one I was focused mainly on administrative skills with then some high-level sourcing. So when I say administrative, it really ranges from anything. It could be customer service reps in a call center all the way up to, public accountants or directors of strategic business development. It was just pretty much anything that wasn't direct patient care or environmental services I was recruiting for in that hospital. So it was it was for the team of us. In my scope, I had the fewest repeat positions, if that makes sense. Where but I had the most one-off positions, because every secretary is different or every customer service tech is different depending on the unit or department they're in. So it was kind of difficult to build up pipelines, but that was my focus for that. Right now, I'm kind of the opposite. I now recruit mainly for dietary aides, unit secretaries, which are nursing support staff, and then also some environmental service positions. And sterile processing, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but that's also a big thing I'm recruiting now throughout our system. So I've covered a decent amount, I would say. It's still a lot to learn when it comes to direct patient care and healthcare, but that's something you gotta, if you don't come from a clinical background as a recruiter, it's a good way to work your way up to it, just because the terminology is much more advanced, and you really need to know the lingo before you start talking to people, just like when you recruit for anything.
You betcha. And as we talk going forward, I'm going to invite you to focus in on your time in corporate recruiting. And
okay.
At a point later on, I may ask you to go back to your staffing services days, but you'll see how I pose the questions as we go along.
Great. And if I get off track, feel free to interrupt me. So.
Oh, have no fear. It's my job. So as you're looking for people now, are you reaching out to folks, or are folks coming to you, or your organization, I should say?
I would say, on the average, just with the size of the organization I work for currently, we don't really necessarily have to look for people unless it's more of a specialty position. We are fortunate with the setup we're in that we have a lot of people who desire to get into our system. So I don't know the exact numbers of applicants we get a year, but I would imagine substantial, that we have a resume database on top of that. So the need to find, my average day-to-day position, I don't really struggle to find resumes. They usually are in the system waiting for me from the night before.
Super. So that suggests that you have one of those legendary black holes, those applicant tracking systems that people look down on so askance. Now, I've got to work with the assumption that you're hiring lots of people over the course of a year. It's not like you can read every resume that's coming in. You're using the systems in order to discern differences between candidates. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you would assume that the candidates are sorry, I'll let you answer your next question. That probably might tie into my next answer.
So if I heard correctly, the system is implementing some judgments about the quality of the resumes that it's seeing. How long ago was it programmed? How is it programmed to do that? Do you have any idea?
Well, I don't know if it specifically renders judgment on the resume quality itself. There has to be at least some text entered into the system when you are applying. Otherwise, it won't really evaluate it. However, it is very easy for the resume to be seen when you do apply. It's probably the first thing you see in a candidate's application. So it'll two things really pop up. You see what jobs they've applied to, and then you see their resume. And you can also search in the system to see if there's other previous applications and how they changed them or tweaked them or vice versa. But the quality of the resume, it can't really be evaluated by the system itself, but it's very, very easy to assess as a recruiter what it looks like, what they're applying for, and just kind of if it'd be a good fit, right? Usually you can make pretty quick snap judgments on it.
Sure. And is your system putting up the job and the resume next to one another so you can see it quickly?
Close enough, yes. Thankfully, a lot of my positions right now are more repetitive. Like, for instance, any nursing support position, for the most part, will have the same job description. So you kind of learn the job description first, which is housed internally and then posted online for the positions. But you can evaluate pretty easily. It's just a matter of moving your mouse slightly in a different click.
Gotcha. And I'm laughing because in the work that I do, where every job is unique and different, I have to put the job up and look at a resume and make the comparison because my system isn't doing any sort of analytics to determine proper fit based upon numbers of usages of particular keywords or where the keywords exist in the document, things along those lines. My system doesn't do. I know some employers do have systems that do that.
Yeah, we do have the functionality to run like searches based on that. You can run Boolean searches or just resume searches throughout the system. For instance, I did that for a sterile processing tech. We need some of those right now. But then I wasn't generating applicants at the facility I needed them. So I ran a resume search through our database and just to kind of just different terminology I was looking for. So we do have the capability to search that, but I would say just when general applicants apply, you can apply to any job you want. It's just a matter of if you're going to be even bothered to be considered for it. I mean, you could not have a college education and apply for the CEO job. It's not going to stop you. It's not going to turn you away. But, realistically, what are your chances here?
Less than zero.
Yeah, I would say so. Hopefully that answers your question.
Perfectly. And folks, we'll be back with more from Lucas in just a moment, but first my job search insider tip for this show, which I think you'll find is a quirky but useful tip. And this one is, I don't know about you, but there are times where I'm not aware that there might be something in my teeth that might be embarrassing when I meet someone. And someone made a suggestion to me recently that I thought was absolutely wonderful, how to make sure that I'm not in one of those awkward moments where I'm talking to someone and they're watching lunch go by in my mouth. And the simplest thing to do is take out your phone, take a selfie, focus in on your mouth, take a look at the image. This way, you don't have one of those embarrassing conversations with someone where they're staring at your mouth and you're noticing that they're staring at your mouth, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's my insider tip for this show. Let's come back to Lucas and pick up where we left off. So I also heard you say, and a previous guest has made mention of this to me as well, that you're looking for or identifying multiple instances of the same resume in the system to see how someone might have tweaked it. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, folks, you can't BS the system because they're checking for that.
With both applicant tracking systems I've used, it's been pretty easy to see how many jobs a candidate has applied to and what kind of trend those applications are going in. So that's just another evaluation piece I'll use for positions that get a high volume of applicants.
Sure. And I believe my previous guest, who was Steve Levy, who raised that as a subject about serial appliers, made mention that with certain numbers of if people are applying to too many jobs, he automatically rejects them. Do you tend to do that as well?
I would say not automatically, but I mean, it also depends on the range of jobs you've applied to. If somebody has applied to 30 unit secretary jobs over the last 10 years, at least they've applied to the same job. So I know they really, really want a unit secretary job. Now, if somebody's applied to a registrar, a patient care tech, a unit secretary, a patient transport aide all in the last week, I'm going to be like, all right, what are you really looking for here? Is it even worth my time to consider you? So it depends on kind of the scope of their applications, but it's definitely something I will consider. Because ultimately, you want somebody who's going to want the job. You don't want somebody who just wants a job. We all want a job. So, but what are you doing to set yourself apart for this job? That there's, there's competition. So I really want somebody who's going to be very focused in their application and really have a purpose for getting that one.
Super. So now you have the resume, and they somewhat appear to fit the role that's involved. Mm-hmm. How do you figure out whether or not they're a fit? What do you kind of look for in their background? What do your hiring managers look for when they interview or when you interview? And again, we're sticking with your current work as a corporate recruiter.
Right. Well, it definitely is job dependent, but for instance, administrative jobs are going to require high level of detail or high attention to detail, because it's pretty tactical application, but it still requires you to be very focused and very, very precise on what you're doing because you're talking about patient care here. So you can't make a screw up by typing in the wrong letter. It could have serious implications. So somebody for that, I'm going to look for backgrounds that have similar work, even if that's not necessarily healthcare related. If they're coming from another hospital, that obviously puts them, a cut above because they have very similar experience. But, somebody maybe from a legal background or from the banking industry where you have to be extremely precise, that's heavily regulated. Heavily regulated industries, I would say, have success, kind of across the board in other heavily regulated industries if you have skill sets that transfer. But when it comes to maybe like, more of a dietary position, you're going to look for somebody who has a food service background. So once again, it's about being more focused in what you're trying to change into. And if you realize in your resume and through the course of your application, you're applying to something that you're kind of switching industries here, try to figure out a way to communicate that in your resume that, I know I come from an administrative background, but I really want to switch over to food service for this reason. Try to highlight emphasize in the cover letter, try to emphasize other skills in your resume that maybe would just apply directly to the opening you're trying to be considered for.
So in your system, just working with that one example for someone who doesn't quite have the right background but wants to enter into it, your system allows them to upload a cover letter or type in information to communicate that desire. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, I think the cover letter would be the best way. I mean, personally as a recruiter, I don't think cover letters are absolutely necessary. But at this point, it's still a formal part of the interview process, so you have to take it seriously. But it's also about, it goes back to when you're applying for a job, you want to be specifically applying for that job. You don't want to just spam your resumes out there. You want to cater each resume to the job you're applying for. And I know that may sound tedious at times, but honestly, if you're applying in mass quantities to jobs, you're not taking your time, and you probably don't deserve to be considered if you can't put in the necessary time and effort fill out the application. Why should we consider you for the job? That's my opinion.
And mine is the broken watch is right twice a day. And to expect that your generic resume is going to fit every position that someone's applying for, even though all of those positions are different, is ridiculous. Resumes need to be tailored to communicate the fit. And the way I normally express it is pretend the reader is 6 years old with ADHD, and how quickly and how easily could that hyperactive individual see that your background fits? I know you have multiple pulls on you just like I do.
Especially the higher level position you get, Jeff, I would say that's even more important to be very, very specific and intentional in your application than your resume. You're not doing yourself any favors if you just send the same thing out there all the time. Employers, that's still an employer's market out there, despite what the job report says.
We agree. So now that you have someone that you're interested in, how do you figure out whether or not they're worth pursuing? What is the assessment process like? How are you trying to figure out whether they might fit? How are your hiring managers trying to do it? And I know it's different for every type of position, but I'm sure there's some common threads.
Yeah, for me, my previous employer had a behavioral assessment, which we would send them prior to even any phone screen, which they'd have to complete and pass. But we don't necessarily, that's not across the board. So first and foremost, people need to make sure they're checking their spam mail, because I can't tell you how many applicants I've reached out to that I said, hey, I emailed you a month ago. Why are you just getting back to me now? And they said, well, it was in my spam folder. I didn't see it. So it's like, okay, you're not paying attention to your email and your personal life when you're applying to jobs. What is that going to tell me about your email at work? That those trends tend to carry over. So first thing, I prefer to set all of my interviews up via email. Now, I understand that's not always the case. It's just my preference, because one, it shows some competency with technology, people's ability to manage their inbox and manage their email, and then also their ability to communicate professionally. The emails I would send them would be professional, and I'd expect that in return.
And I know I prefer by email as well, because most of the time I'm playing phone tag with people.
Right, and you can get lost.
Call, leave a message, wait for a call back. You might be away from your desk. It goes to voicemail. If I can send an email with my availability, it's just a lot easier, and you don't have to play tag quite as much.
Yeah.
At most, it's 3 transactions versus what could be a lot more. So
right.
I agree with you about scheduling.
I feel like
email.
You can talk to any corporate recruiter, and they'll tell you, think about how many calls you think a recruiter gets in a day and triple it. That's probably the realistic number. So you can see why email, the technology is great. It's there for a reason. So utilize it, take it to your advantage as a candidate. If somebody's emailing you, there's some interest there. It's a way to set yourself apart. You've got to do the first step in the process and just getting your application noticed.
Cool. So next thing that you do to figure out whether or not you're interested in, how does it progress from how they respond to your messages?
Like I said, definitely the professionalism in their response to the email. I understand some people may be writing from their phones and it's not as easy, so I take it into account depending on the type of position it is and kind of what it is, what the response is. But it's really expressing a specific time that you can meet, and then expressing your interest right away helps things too. Making sure the recruiter knows, as a recruiter, making sure I know that you're interested. That always helps.
And in terms of the actual assessment, when you're actually interviewing someone, what do you actually look for when you're talking to them?
Well, I'll usually first clarify that the job they applied for is definitely the one they want. You'll go over the responsibilities, the hours, the shift, everything that you really would expect somebody who has applied for a job that they're definitely interested in it. After that, I'll dig into their resume. Then usually you have standard interview questions you have to ask, what you're looking for. But I would say the biggest thing is when somebody's really interviewing for a position, they're doing well, they're providing you examples to all of their answers. They're not just saying the generic. Like one of the best ones to get generic answers to is, why should I hire you? Everybody says I'm a good team player. I'm dedicated. I show up on time. It's like, okay, but tell me you're a good team player, but why you're a good team player. Talk about what you had to see more to your advantage in a professional situation, or talk about a time where you showed up on time even in a snowstorm, or something like that. Don't just say, hey, I'm a really nice person, you should hire me, which hopefully everybody's a nice person. You're giving the benefit of the doubt, but come up with something original and specific to you.
I agree. I did a YouTube video a while back called Stories Are Not Just for Bedtime, as a way of encouraging people to tell stories that demonstrate their successes, how they overcame adversity, a whole bunch of other things, to demonstrate how they would perform within a firm and their culture.
Yeah, and any recruiter should be asking questions that prevent the yes or no answers. They should be asking questions that require you to give some explanation. That's what we're looking for. So take that as a hint that, hey, give me some context, some background here. This is what I'm asking you.
Cool. Now, so far I heard you talk about standardized questions that you ask. So let's assume the basic name, rank, and serial number questions.
Yeah.
Confirming name, where they live, talking with them about the position and what the requirements of it are, invite them to talk about how their background fits. Which of those, now you mentioned the team player question, I believe. What sort of more difficult interview questions do you tend to use in your interviews?
Well, I really like behavioral ones. I would say I try to save the more difficult questions for the hiring manager interviews when the candidates get past me and get to the hiring manager, because it's really the hiring manager's opinion that you're going to have to influence or express that you can do the job. But, you can choose from a lot of different questions and really want to cater those to specific to the department. So it's hard to narrow it down to something specifically. I think the teamwork question you referenced was more of an answer that candidates usually give me when I ask them, in your words, why should we hire you for this position? That's kind of how I like the phone calls, just to get a sense for the person. Because, by the end, they're usually a little relaxed, a little bit more open with their answers. So I like to hear what really comes out when, things have settled down in their minds, that they're not as nervous.
Great. So from you, they go on to a hiring manager who does the skills assessment. And
Yeah.
do you get the types of feedback for why someone is rejected and or why they're turned on by someone?
A lot of times you got the culture of the department they're interviewing for. I mean, hiring managers want people who are going to click with them and then click with their team. Any good manager wants that. So, that's definitely one of the most positive feedbacks. People who think they will fit right in, they'll take a shot on just because personality-wise don't mesh, and they figure they can teach them the other thing. But, yeah, I mean, it's really the feedback also can be negative on the other side, where it's just like there's no way this person would ever be able to handle this job. We'll have to find somebody else. They can flip both ways just as strongly.
Gotcha. So they're interested in hiring them. How do you guys construct the offer in a way that is good for the applicant and good for the organization?
Well, I think that process can vary pretty greatly. I mean, all offers should be done with a conversation. I think it's better to give candidates time to think about it. But I know, some organizations would probably have you send the offer letter first and then call them, or call them, then don't send them an offer letter until they accept. There's really a variety I think you can go there. But either way, I think the best way is to go about it is definitely a conversation from the recruiter to the candidate. And it should always come from HR, because HR expresses things that, the hiring managers in the organization may not know, because they're running departments. They're not actually working in HR handling stuff on a day-to-day basis.
Gotcha. So person accepts an offer and they go through an onboarding process. It's easy. Now I'm curious, comparing what you do now in corporate with what you did working for a staffing firm, do you notice differences in how you assess for talent when you were a staffing services person versus now?
Yeah. I would say when I was in staffing, it's a very sales-oriented industry. I'm sure as you know, you've been in, a headhunting role or recruiting role for a long time. I mean, recruitment sales no matter what, but when you're in staffing, I'd say it's more hard sales, because you're really selling the candidate on you, especially passive candidates, people who aren't actively looking for jobs, but they may be open to switching if the right opportunity comes up. That's when you're really selling the trust, telling, what you bring to the table. Where on the flip side of corporate recruiting, I expect candidates to be selling me. I don't, my job is to evaluate talent for the organization. I'm not trying to sell you into a role. Like I said earlier, I'm looking for people who are really interested in coming to the organization I work for. That's really going to be the biggest thing. If you communicate your passion for the job you applied for and why you want to be there, I think that'll give you a better shot.
Super. Lucas, we're coming up on the end of our time with one another today. Is there any particular advice you'd like to share with job hunters that will help them with the process of applying for a job, interviewing, any aspect of the hiring process from their vantage point? Yeah,
it's a multi-step process, in my opinion. I know I've done it. I've switched jobs several times in my career, and it's never easy to get your foot out the door on it, I guess you could say, or get started on it. But you really have to start internally by assessing what you're qualified for and what you want to do. Because if you don't know what you're qualified for or what you want to do, you're going to have no idea what to apply for. It's just going to overwhelm you. Because there are lots of jobs out there, but there are also lots of people looking for jobs. So that's why I'd start, and then build your resume from there. Even if it requires you to look at jobs to see if you have an idea, just look at the job description. There's some postings, but don't apply to a job until you really are 100% sure you want it. Because what if you get an offer for it? Are you going to turn it down, or are you going to take it? Don't put yourself in that position unless you're committed to it.
And not only that, if you haven't figured out what you want to be doing and you're just interviewing for jobs willy-nilly, you're wasting a lot of people's time if at the end of the day you wouldn't wind up taking the offer. Now, if you just figure your time 2 or 3 people within a department, interviewing someone, that becomes an expensive proposition to, at the end of the day, turn down an offer that you never would have accepted anyway. It's crazy.
Right. That's a great point. And I can tell you there's nothing more frustrating as a recruiter when you talk to people and you ask them, hey, why'd you apply to this job? Well, I just want to get my foot in the door, so I'm not actually open to part-time. I want something full-time. So it's like, okay, this fall to waste. It can be very frustrating.
We agree. Hey, Lucas, thank you so much for making time today. How can folks connect with you?
Yeah, I'm a recruiter, so please find me on LinkedIn. Just search me by my name, Lucas Schoolfield, just Schoolfield put together on the last name. And feel free to connect with me. I have over 2,000 connections at this point. So if you're interested in any positions that the organization I work for or any advice on anything, I'm always open to talking to people.
Super. Lucas, thank you. And folks, we'll be back next time with more advice from another expert to help you with finding your next position. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and if you liked what you heard today, if you found the content helpful, I want to encourage you to visit my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us, and go exploring, because there's a lot of information there that you can watch, listen to, or read that's going to help you find work more quickly. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn, send a connection request to me at linkedin.com/IN/the-big-game-hunter. Lastly, sometimes you just need some advice. You need to talk to someone who doesn't have an interest in whether or not you take a job or not. When you visit my website, take a look at the tab that says Trusted Advisor Services. I'm happy to sit down and talk with any of you, sort through a difficult situation, and help you come to a great decision. I'm Jeff Altman. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Hope you have a great day.
For more job search advice, visit Jeff's website at thebiggamehunter.us. That's thebiggamehunter.us.